Hello, my amazing children. This is Grandma Carla back with the last chapter of Pippi Longstocking. And I have enjoyed this book so much. And it has taken me a long time to read it because I've had a very busy time lately. But we're on the last chapter. Pippi celebrates her birthday. And I'm going to show you the first picture because it's an envelope and Pippi's spelling is not very good. Pippi does need to go to school. I'm going to read you what it says because even if you can read, you won't be able to read this very well because the spelling is all wrong. But this is what it says. One day, Tommy and Annika found a note in their mailbox. To Tommy and Annika, it said on the envelope. And when they opened it, they found a card that said, Tommy and Annika should come to Pippi's house for a birthday party tomorrow afternoon. You can wear whatever you like. Okay, if you're big and you know how to spell, look at that spelling that she wrote that with. Pippi does need to go to school and learn a little bit about spelling. But she got the point across. That made Tommy and Annika so happy that they started jumping around and dancing. They had no problem understanding what the card said, even though the spelling was a little odd. Pippi had gone to a great deal of trouble to write it. Now, it's true that she had said that she didn't recognize the letter I that day when she went to school, but the fact was that she actually did know how to write, at least a little. When she was sailing the 7 seas, one of the sailors on her father's ship would sometimes sit with her on the quarterdeck in the evening and try to teach her to write. Unfortunately, Pippi was not a very patient student. In the middle of everything, she might say, "No, Fridolf," the sailor's name was Fridolf. "No, Fridolf, I just don't care about all this. I'm going to climb up to the crow's nest and see what the weather will be like tomorrow." That's why it wasn't so strange that she had trouble writing. She spent a whole night working on that invitation. Then early in the morning, just as the stars were beginning to fade over the roof of Villekulla, she slipped over to Tommy and Annika's house to put the note in their mailbox. As soon as Tommy and Annika got home from school, they started dressing up for the party. Annika asked her mother to curl her hair, which she did. She also put a big pink silk ribbon in Annika's hair. Tommy combed his hair with water so that it would stay nice and flat. He certainly didn't want to have curly hair. Then Annika wanted to put on her very best dress, but her mother didn't think that was a good idea. Annika was never very clean or tidy when she came home from visiting Pippi. So Annika had to settle for her next best dress. Tommy didn't care much about what he wore as long as he looked more or less presentable. They had bought a present for Pippi, of course. They took the money out of their own piggy banks, and on their way home from school, they went into the toy shop on Zorgatan and bought a very nice, well, let's keep it a secret for a little while longer. The present was now wrapped in green paper and tied up with plenty of string. When Tommy and Annika were ready, Tommy picked up the package and they set off as their mother anxiously warned them to be careful about their clothes. Annika also wanted to have a turn carrying the package, and they agreed that when it came time to give the present to Pippi, they would do it together. It was now well into November, and twilight came early. As Tommy and Annika walked through the gate of Villekulla, they were holding each other's hand tightly because it was quite dark in Pippi's garden. The old trees, which were just about to lose the last of their leaves, rustled so glumly. "Sounds like autumn," said Tommy. How much nicer it was to see lights in all the windows of Villekulla and to know that they were going to have a birthday party there. Usually Tommy and Annika would race down the kitchen path, but today they went up to the front entrance. The horse was not on the porch. Tommy knocked politely on the door. From inside they could hear a muffled voice say, "On this dark night, who do I see coming up the path to my house? Is it a ghost, or could it be only a poor little mouse?" "No, Pippi, it's us," cried Annika. "Open the door." Pippi opened the door. "Oh, Pippi, why did you say that part about a ghost? I got so scared," said Annika, forgetting all about wishing Pippi a happy birthday. Pippi laughed heartily and threw open the door to the kitchen. Oh, how wonderful it was to come into all the light and warmth. The birthday party was going to be held in the kitchen because that was the nicest room. There were only 2 other rooms on the ground floor. One was the living room, which had only one piece of furniture, and the other was Pippi's bedroom. But the kitchen was big and spacious, and Pippi had decorated it so nicely. She had put rugs on the floor, and on the table was a new tablecloth that Pippi had made herself. The flowers she had embroidered on it were quite a bit strange, but Pippi claimed that those sorts of flowers grew in the farthest India. So everything was as it should be. The curtains were drawn, and a crackling fire blazed in the stove. Mr. Nielsen was sitting on the top of the firewood box, banging 2 saucepans lids together, and over in the far corner stood the horse. Naturally, he was also invited to the party. Now, Tommy and Annika finally remembered to wish Pippi a happy birthday. Tommy bowed, and Annika curtsied, and when they had handed her the green package and said, "Many happy returns of the day," Pippi thanked them and then eagerly tore open the package, and inside was a music box. Pippi went wild with delight. She hugged Tommy and she hugged Annika. She hugged the music box and she hugged the wrapping paper. Then she wound up the music box, and with much plinking and plunking, it played a tune that was probably supposed to be "The More We Get Together." Pippi kept winding it up again and again, and she seemed to have forgotten about everything else, but suddenly something occurred to her. "Oh dear, I have to give you your birthday presents too," she said. "But it's not our birthday," said Tommy and Annika. Pippi looked at them in surprise. "No, but it's my birthday, isn't it? Surely I can give you birthday presents too, if I like. Or does it say in one of your school books that it's not allowed? Is there something about plutification that says it shouldn't be done?" "No, of course it can be done," said Tommy. "It's just not customary. But I, for one, would love to have a present." "Me too," said Annika. So Pippi ran into the living room to get 2 packages that were sitting on the cabinet. When Tommy opened his package, he found a little flute made of ivory. And in Annika's package, there was a beautiful pin shaped like a butterfly. The butterfly's wings were set with red and blue and green stones. After they had all opened their birthday presents, it was time to eat. Piles of cookies and rolls covered the table. The cookies had a rather peculiar shape, but Pippi claimed that that's the way the cookies were in China. Pippi poured cocoa with whipped cream into their cups, and then they were all supposed to sit down. But Tommy said, "Whenever Mama and Papa have dinner parties, all of the gentlemen are given cards that tell them which lady they're supposed to escort to the table. I think we should do that too." "Let's do it," said Pippi. "Although it won't be easy for us, since I'm the only gentleman here," said Tommy doubtfully. "Oh, nonsense," said Pippi. "Or maybe you think that Mr. Nielsen is a lady." "No, of course not. I forgot about Mr. Nielsen," said Tommy. And then he sat down on the firebox to write the cards. "Mr. Settigren has the pleasure of escorting Miss Longstocking." Mr. Settigren, that's me, he said, sounds quite pleased as he showed Pippi the card. Then he wrote the next card. "Mr. Nielsen has the pleasure of escorting Miss Settigren." "Yes, but the horse has to have a card too," said Pippi firmly, even though he wouldn't be sitting at the table. As Pippi dictated, Tommy wrote another card. It said, "The horse has the pleasure of staying in the corner, and there he'll get his cookies and sugar." Pippi held the card under the horse's nose and said, "Read this and tell me what you think." Since the horse had no objections, Tommy offered Pippi his arm and escorted her to the table. Mr. Nielsen made no attempt to invite Annika, so she decided to carry him over to the table. But he refused to sit in the chair, so he sat on the table. But he didn't want any cocoa with whipped cream either. But when Pippi poured water into his cup, he grabbed it with both hands and drank. Annika and Tommy and Pippi munched and crunched, and Annika said if these were the sort of cookies they made in China, then she was going to move to China when she grew up. When Mr. Nielsen had emptied his cup, he turned it upside down and put it on his head. When Pippi saw this, she did the same thing, but since she hadn't finished drinking her cocoa, a little stream trickled down her forehead and ran down her nose. But Pippi just stuck out her tongue to stop it. "Wouldn't want to waste a drop," she said. Tommy and Annika first thoroughly licked their cups clean before they put them on their heads. Then everyone was content and full, and the horse had been given what he was supposed to have. Pippi took a firm grip on all four corners of the tablecloth and picked it up, making the cups and the cookie plates clatter together as if they were in a sack. She stuffed the whole bundle into the firewood box. "I always like to clean up as soon as I've finished eating," she said, and then it was time to play. Pippi suggested that they play a game called Don't Step on the Floor. It was very simple. The only thing they had to do was to move around the whole kitchen without touching a foot to the floor. Pippi climbed all the way around in a flash, but even Tommy and Annika could do it. They started the kitchen sink, and if they stretched their legs far enough, they could reach the stove, and then go from the stove to the firewood box, from the firewood box to the hat shelf, and then down onto the table, and from there across two chairs to the corner cupboard. It was 6 feet from the cupboard to the kitchen sink, but fortunately, that's where the horse was standing. They could climb up his tail and then slide down his head, and if they jumped at just the right moment, they would land back in the kitchen sink. After they'd been doing this for a while, Annika's dress was no longer her next best, but rather her next best, and Tommy was as covered with grime as a chimney sweep. They decided to think of something else to do. "Let's go up to the attic and say hello to the ghost," suggested Pippi. Annika flinched. "Are there ghosts in the attic?" she asked. "Are there? Tons of them," said Pippi. "It's crawling with all kinds of spooks and ghosts up there. You practically trip over them. Shall we go up there?" "Oh, Pippi," said Annika, giving her a reproachful look. "Mama told us that there's no such thing as spooks or ghosts," said Tommy staunchly. "And she's right," said Pippi, "except for here, because all of them live in my attic. And it doesn't do any good to ask them to leave. But they're not dangerous. They'll just pinch your arms hard enough to leave bruises, and then they howl, and they use their heads as bowling balls." "They use their heads as bowling balls?" whispered Annika. "That's exactly what they do," said Pippi. "Come on, let's go up and talk to them. I'm an excellent bowler." Tommy didn't want to show that he was scared, and he actually wouldn't mind seeing a ghost. It would be something he could tell the other boys at school. Besides, he took comfort in the fact that the ghost probably wouldn't dare go after Pippi. So he decided to go along. Poor Annika wanted nothing to do with the whole thing, but then it occurred to her that a tiny little ghost might come slinking downstairs as she sat all alone in the kitchen. And then that did it. She'd rather be with Pippi and Tommy and 1,000 ghosts than be all alone in the kitchen with the smallest child ghost. Pippi went first. She opened the door to the attic stairs. It was pitch dark. Tommy kept a tight grip on Pippi, and Annika kept an even tighter grip on Tommy. Then they went up the stairs. There was a creaking and a squeaking with every step they took. Tommy started to wonder whether it might have been better to stay behind. Annika didn't need to wonder. She was sure of it. Eventually, the stairs ended and they were standing in the attic. It was completely dark except for a little strip of moonlight on the floor. A sighing and a whistling came from every nook and cranny as the wind blew through all the cracks. "Hey, all you ghosts," shouted Pippi. But if there actually was a ghost, he was not answering. "I should have known," said Pippi. "They've all gone to a board meeting of the Spooks and the Ghost Association." Annika uttered a sigh of relief. She hoped that the meeting was going to last a very long time. But just then, a horrible sound came from a corner of the attic. "Clear-wheat!" they heard, and the next instant, Tommy saw something come rushing toward him in the dark. He felt it flutter against his forehead, and then he saw something black disappear through a little window that stood open. He screamed to high heaven, "A ghost! A ghost!" Then Annika joined in. "The poor thing is going to be late for the meeting," said Pippi. "If it was a ghost, that is, and not an owl." After a moment, she went on, "By the way, there's no such thing as ghost. So the more I think about it, the more likely it seems that that was an owl. And if anyone claims that ghosts actually exist, I'll twist their nose." "Yes, but you said that yourself," said Annika. "Is that right? Did I really?" said Pippi. "Well, then I guess I'm going to have to twist my own nose." And she took a firm grip of her nose and twisted it. After that, Tommy and Annika felt a bit calmer. They were even brave enough to venture over to the window and peek out into the garden. Big black clouds were moving across the sky, doing their best to hide the moon. The trees were rustling. Tommy and Annika looked around, but then, oh, how horrible! They saw a white figure coming toward them. "A ghost!" Tommy shrieked wildly. Annika was so scared that she couldn't even scream. The figure kept coming closer, and Tommy and Annika clung to each other and shut their eyes. But then the ghost spoke. "Look what I found! Papa's nightshirt was in an old sea chest over there. If I take up the hem, I could actually wear it." Pippi came over to them with the nightshirt, dragging around her feet. "Oh, Pippi, I almost died of fright," said Annika. "But nightshirts aren't dangerous," said Pippi. "They don't even bite, except maybe in self-defense." Pippi now decided to look through the sea chest properly. She carried it over to the window and threw open the lid so that the faint moonlight would fall on the contents. There were a lot of old clothes, which she tossed out onto the attic floor. The chest also contained a telescope, a couple of old books, 3 pistols, a sword, and a bag of gold coins. "Tiddly-pom and piddly-dee," said Pippi with delight. "How exciting," said Tommy. Pippi gathered up everything in the nightshirt, and then they went back down to the kitchen. Annika was very happy to get out of the attic. "Never let children handle guns," said Pippi, as she picked up a pistol in each hand, or else an accident might easily happen. She said, firing both pistols at once. "What a loud bang that was," she said, looking up at the ceiling. She could see 2 bullet holes. "Who knows?" she said, sounding hopeful. "Maybe the bullets went straight through the ceiling and hit some of the ghost in the leg. That should teach them to stop and think twice the next time they plan to scare any innocent little children. Because even if ghosts don't exist, there's no reason for them to scare people out of their wits. By the way, would you each like to have your own pistols?" she asked. Tommy was thrilled, and Annika wanted one too, as long as it wasn't loaded. "Now we can start a band of robbers if we want to," said Pippi, holding the telescope up to her eye. "With this, I think I can almost see the fleas in South America," she went on. "It will also be a good thing to have if we're going to start a band of robbers." Just then, someone knocked on the door. It was Tommy and Annika's father, who had come to take his children home. He claimed it was long past their bedtime. Tommy and Annika hurried to say thank you and goodbye and gather up all their belongings, the flute and the butterfly pin and the pistols. Pippi followed her guest out to the pet porch and watched them go down the garden path. They turned around and waved to Pippi. The light from inside the house fell all around her. There she stood with her red braids sticking straight out. She was wearing her papa's nightshirt, which dragged around her feet. In one hand she held the pistol, and in the other the sword. She used the sword to present arms. When Tommy and Annika and their papa reached the gate, they heard her shouting something after them. They stopped to listen. The wind was blowing so loudly in the trees that they had to strain to hear her. But they did hear her. "I'm going to be a pirate when I grow up," Pippi yelled. "How about you?" That is the end of the chapter and the book. So I'm going to show you all the pictures. I already showed you the envelope, so we're going to start with the next picture, which was the butterfly pin that Pippi gave to Annika. And then a picture of them playing the jumping game where they had to go all around the kitchen without touching the floor. Look at Annika's legs up there on the shelf. How silly. We shouldn't climb shelves. And then, here's a picture of Pippi as she stood in the door saying goodbye to her friends. She says, I'm going to be a pirate when I grow up. How about you? And that is the end of the story of Pippi Longstocking. And I do wonder what Pippi's going to do when she grows up. Do you think she's going to become a pirate? I don't know. I think Pippi might be too kind-hearted to become a pirate, don't you? And this is Grandma Carla, and I love you.